Great.
All right. It says we're live on YouTube. This is the first time I've used it. This is pretty slick, not having to download. This is Richard Nikoley at freetheanimal.com. And just spur of the moment, I'm like, hey, Sean out there in Italy, he is the writer of the daily Rude Awakening newsletter. Well, Monday through Friday. And it's mostly financial analysis, his crazy stories about living in London and Singapore and Hong Kong and for a long time Philippines, and now back in Italy as an Italian citizen. And I got to ask you, Sean, it's like, how prescient was that decision? You know, given the election a few days, what was it, like 3 days ago now, huh?
Yeah, it was on Sunday night. Excuse me. Yeah, Giorgia Meloni, our new prime minister. She is not a fascist, by the way. I mean, the CNN stories. In fact, Matteo Renzi, the former prime minister, was on CNN. I think it was yesterday, and just said, "You guys need to stop saying this stuff." I mean, on CNN, which is beautiful.
I mean, because did you listen to her speech? That section of it, which everybody clipped, you know, that one section of it, including myself, and wrote a blog post based around it. I even did a transcript of it. But if you actually read it and you have a reading comprehension above, first grade, you say, that's about the most anti-fascist speech I've ever read in my life.
Exactly.
Because it was all about corporate and government collusion for the benefit of the elite. What in the fuck do you think fascism is? Right?
I mean, even Mussolini said it should be called corporatism. You know, it's not like he didn't say that.
I'm going to shut up in just a second here and let you speak. But there was just one other thing. Like, I had these people coming to me and saying, well, she's like WEF and Rockefeller member. I said, yeah, and she supported vaccinations and Green Pass too. That you take what you can get. You know, it reminds me of way back when, in the mid 90s, Usenet and internet a lot, and you had the libertarians, and you had I'm very fond of her writings, both fiction and nonfiction, but you had the Randroids, and I'm telling you, it reminded me of them in the sense of their purity tests. Like, nothing is ever good enough because it violates this principle and this principle and this principle and this principle. So that's why they get nowhere, and it's just a constant stream of intellectual masturbation. That is all.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's all it is. It's intellectual wanking. I think you're absolutely right about that. It's funny because I was at Hans Hoppe Shindig in Bodrum a couple of weeks ago, which was great. It's great to see everybody and catch up, and I got to see, the more well-known, like Kinsella, Doug French, and all those guys were there, and the lesser well-known guys like myself and a bunch of my good buddies that we get drunk once a year, or at least we try to anyway, on the boats out in the Med. But there's still, especially the young guys, like, it's almost like they haven't figured out that the world isn't black and white yet. So, and it was funny. I'm on the Telegram chat with them, and it's like, pointing out, it's just so funny that you said that. They posted the picture of Maloney on the WEF site going, bah, 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 bah. And I'm like, guys, listen, one, if you're looking for a politician to solve all your problems, you're digging in the wrong place, to quote Raiders of the Lost Ark. They're never going to solve all your problems. Two, it's the panic in Europe. Yeah, I was going to say panic in Europe over COVID, which I'm with you, completely misplaced, totally nuts, totally regret getting my vax. Like, I had to do it to live in the Philippines. Basically, they wouldn't let you go to the supermarkets if you weren't vaxxed. And they completely, that's a whole other subject. But they panicked here, and she was one of the panickers too. And I think everyone's coming around to the fact that these vaccines are one of the great scams of the 21st century. I mean, if not the greatest, it's up there with Y2K. It's like you take all this medicine, even though it's just mechanical medicine, that you don't need. Absolutely needless.
We have to be careful about how we refer to them, because we are on YouTube. So
yes, of course, I apologize.
Yeah. But we got plenty to talk about otherwise. And besides that, it's just like I'm so over it. I was fortunate. I was standing in the checkout line for Vietnam on March 15th when the flight got canceled, and I couldn't go. That was to Saigon, Ho Chi Minh. And there was a flight to Hanoi, but my visa was port of entry specific. That's how the commies are. And so, but I was anxious to go, because back in the day when I was traipsing around here, I've been to the Philippines dozens and dozens of times, and every place else, and including where I live now, Thailand. And so I'm so glad in retrospect that got canceled, because Thailand, as I explained in another live stream, that's how I found out about StreamYard, this cool deal. But I was saying that, Thailand is a lot of talk, just, lip service, go through the motions, wear the masks, wear the uniforms, do everything that you're supposed to do to show. But in terms of enforcement, pretty lax, And I heard from people that were in Vietnam, and holy shit, I think it was much like Philippines, locking people in the door, patrolling the streets with machine guns. There's nothing, not even close. I mean, the worst part about the whole thing was that the inconvenience of having so many places
closed,
like places like I like to go, like girl bars,
Yeah. They wrecked. I mean, Cebu used to be a fun town before they wrecked it, and to me, it was just such a lost opportunity for the Philippines, because even if they were like that, and I expected them to be like that, like with 7,300 islands, you have no centralized power, like what are you following,
They always say, well, essential things can remain open. I said, essential to whom?
Exactly. We need them. It's just for me. It's just it's the one reason why I don't. Well, one of the reasons, but I don't miss Asia. I think when people say to me too, like, well, don't you miss the United States? I'm like, I grew up in New Jersey. Like, no, I don't. Yeah. It's probably because I grew up in Jersey. If I grew up in Florida or somewhere else, I probably miss it a lot more.
Well, I had 5 years living in Japan. Now, I did get weary of Japan somewhat, but I never really wearied of Philippines and Korea. And Korea back then was kind of like Thailand. It was a developing country still,
right?
In the 80s, late 80s, right? But it developed very rapidly. It was pretty amazing. I mean, just the change. My first time there was 82. And then when I was going regularly there from 84 on, I could just see it every visit, how it was just exploding, right? Just right place at the right time, because Japan was getting very expensive, and Koreans were willing to step in and basically do the same thing in terms of consumer electronics and such, as Japan had been doing since the 60s. And they produce great shit. I mean,
that's right.
They're every bit as good in terms of quality as the Japanese are. But
I think also Western companies use so many of their components as well. So even if you're not buying Samsung, I mean, most of the iPhone is from that part of the world anyway. Whether it's Taiwan or Japan or Korea, and that's what happens when places get too expensive and you move your production. And if you can move it to high value places with high IQ workers, you're laughing. Okay. And we see that happening now. That's why a lot of manufacturers moved out of China, because, you know, if you're producing even mid-level stuff, you can do that very well in Vietnam for much cheaper. So Vietnam has been roaring right now. I haven't been to Vietnam in many years. I'd love to see it again. But I did find it funny that I actually preferred Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City. I thought that was pretty funny, because I should like the capitalist part better, surely, right? But I thought Hanoi was beautiful.
Yeah, I've heard that. I saw there's a guy, what's his name? Felix Rex, Black Pigeon Speaks. You probably heard of him. He did.
I do. One of my friends just mentioned him yesterday. I got to start reading him. Yeah.
Yeah. His videos are amazing. They're very creative. And his they're all monologues. He does do live stream guests and stuff. He's had that guy, Gonzalo Lira, during the whole brain thing. Yeah. But you know, that is just not something I hang on. So we have here's the thing. Let's go back, right, a little bit. And I'm looking at this, the whole thing, and I'm seeing, well, where can you kind of see the first, maybe brewing for a long time, maybe since the political correctness of the early 90s, and just like growing and growing and growing and festering and festering. But the first real kind of earth-shattering thing that I think happened that really set us on a path that we're still in is Brexit in June of 2016. It was June, I think.
That's correct.
2016. And the world was like, shut up. This can't happen.
You're not allowed to do that.
Shut up. This can't happen.
Vote harder.
And it took them. And the thing was, everybody was so gobsmacked that it ultimately took them 3 years in order to make sure that it wasn't a threat to democracy. Right? Don't you love that kind of thing?
I love that. Like, I always say, if it comes from the left, it's democracy. If it comes from the right, it's populism. It's just such an incredible double standard.
Well, it's hilarious. I saw this clip that you can say left wing, right wing, but it's two wings of a bird, so to speak, right? But I saw it was so. They did this running clip of like, have the talking points go out. So all the talking heads in the media organizations say exactly the same thing. Someone threads those together. So you go all around the world and them saying the most far right since Mussolini, the most far right since Mussolini.
Since Mussolini.
Right, just dozens of times all over the world, right? The same exact thing.
Yep.
But the thing is that's funny about that is, my comment on it was, wow, who knew that there were so many far right Italians, right? They're just a bit, they're conservative, and they're Catholics, and family.
Yep.
In what culture is family more important than Italian culture, than traditional Italian culture? Right?
I can't think of one. I mean, it's really funny because La Familia is supposed to be where it's at. And it is where everybody still is, even in the capitalistic developed north where I live. I mean, it's all about family. I live in Asti for your viewers, so that's Asti Spumante, which I'm not very big fan of, but Barbera di Asti I'm a huge fan of. So they do great wine up here. And it's, the one thing that we loved about Asti when we moved here, where there were children everywhere. Like in Italy, you hear, demographic collapse, and there's, you can buy a house for €1 because all these villages are empty. And that's all true. That's not fabricated. But we just happened to get into a city where we were sitting in the town square about 3:00 in the afternoon. The school had let out in April, and it was flooded with children. And we were like, and we're looking at our kid, and our kid's like, oh my God, I haven't seen children in years because we've lived in the Philippines and weren't allowed out. So for us, it was a no-brainer to stay here. That Giorgia Maloney is talking about that stuff is, again, for the left that has singularly tried to destroy the absolute nuclear family over the past 50 years. Georgia Maloney is a problem that should have gone away. Nobody should be speaking about that stuff. And again, when it comes from the corporatist media, anything they don't like is fascist. Anything they don't like is fascist. So fascism has gone from corporatism to, if you don't agree with me, you're a fascist. It has no meaning anymore.
It's amazing. And when did all these Swedes become far right?
And again, the political spectrum has moved so far left that even if you're a wee bit conservative, you're far right nowadays, because there is no right wing really anywhere. And most of the right wing have become big stateists anyway. That you rarely hear the right wing going, okay, we've got to cut our spending, because in a democracy, that's how you get votes. You bribe people. It's just that simple. If you look at Boris in the UK, why he was such a catastrophic failure as prime minister is because in the election, he breaks through that Labour red wall in the north. He wins all these seats, and then he just institutes the policies that those people just voted against. Like, it's almost like, okay, we'll try it your way, Boris, give it to me. And it'll be like, no, I'll give it to you your old way.
It's like the Republicans in the U.S., whom I call stupid.
Yeah.
I call the Democrats the evil party, and I call the Republicans the stupid party. And because I don't know if you remember 1990 or 2000, 1994, the trouncing that the Republicans gave in Bill Clinton's first midterms.
That's right. Contract with America. Yeah. I
Contract
do.
with
Very
America.
well.
And what was their first big agenda item?
Oh,
listen to this.
I can't. You
prayer in
tell
schools.
me. I can't remember.
Prayer in schools.
Yeah. In their defense, I think that was their first backlash against what was, because I think they had said you can't say under God in the Pledge of Allegiance at that point. Everyone was like, that's dumb too. It's just dumbness with more dumbness.
The problem with the Republicans, to me, is a guy, like a young guy. He's got his sights set on this one girl in high school, right? And he thinks that perseverance and long suffering and being a doormat, because she sees it coming a mile away. He'll do anything, right? Yeah. He'll do anything just to get her a little bit of her love. Every nice word is like some shit. And don't tell me you haven't done it. Every young guy has probably done that. If the prize that you conjure up in your head, which is a fantasy, that's the first thing you got to realize.
Yeah. We all learned the hard way, Richard. Unfortunately,
there is no such thing as such a woman.
No. Right? No. Wholly manufactured.
Right. And so. That's what the Republican Party reminds me of. It's like, if we just do this, they're finally gonna like us. They're finally gonna like us, right? They're finally gonna. Right.
Hey, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because in the UK they've got that problem with the budget. I don't know if you've been following what just happened in the UK markets. They blew up.
Correspondingly, the Democrats are like one of these ultra mean girls, in the school, and they'll let you do all sorts of things, buy them all those gifts, and do everything and sweet talk every now and then, just enough to keep you on the. It's just the perfect thing for it. But to go back, so Brexit, the thing that just was impossible, could not happen, and took 3 years to get done because they had to make sure that the democratic vote to institute it wasn't a threat to democracy. So then, like on the heels, what is it, 4 or 5 months later, The other impossible thing happens. Trump, and that was just too much.
Yeah.
I mean, that was that the pressure relief, the societal pressure relief valve was insufficient, and so the whole shit blew up, and we've been blown up ever since, basically since 2016.
It's funny because I think I'm a British citizen as well. I voted out, but I voted out not thinking we had a hope in hell of winning. Like nobody was more shocked than I was, and it was really funny because I went back into a bank at that point in my life stupidly, and I was sitting at my desk watching the BBC results come out, and and just on live feed, I'm like, and I think it was oh god, it was Sunderland. Sunderland voted out by an enormous margin. It was, I think it was like by 20 points. It was huge, and I just went, "Oh my good, wait, this is going to happen. This is going to happen." And once it happened, I was thrilled it happened. I'm still happy we're out because I live in continental Europe. I was like, you voted out for Brexit, but you live in Italy. It's like I got choices. I'm going to play the cards I'm dealt. The interesting thing about everyone in the UK who's still screaming about, we should have never left the EU. I'm not sure the EU is going to be around much longer, not in its present form, certainly. And certainly not with all of the political turmoil brought about by, say, terrible leadership, first and foremost, vassalage to the United States, these stupid sanctions that are hurting Europe far more than they're hurting Russia. Russia didn't even care about these sanctions. So for me, it's like, the United Kingdom people who are going, oh my God, we need to get back in the EU. It's like you're pledging your support to something that may not exist very soon. And once kind of Brexit happened, I knew Trump was going to win. Once Brexit happened, that it was kind of like, if this, then that. Like, Trump will go, definitely he'll win. After that, there were parts of his presidency I really loved, and there were things that he did towards the end I was like, not great. But anyway, you can't have everything.
They got him good with COVID because he's a notorious germaphobe, and he's he may know a lot about business, a lot about property development, especially New York City. I mean, there's probably no place that's harder to develop property and do it so successfully as New York City and all that. He knows a lot about it, and as a guy with no experience in politics at all, never held an office, I thought politically he did great.
He did a lot of great things.
I just watched this documentary recently produced by BBC. It's on BBC Two. But if you're not coming from a BBC server, then you can't watch it. So you'll have to BitTorrent it if you know how to do that stuff. I got it on.
Not that we ever do that.
Easy TV or Pirate Bay or one of those two things. Hey, fuck it. You know what? I've told people this before. I'm happy to pay. Like, for instance, Google Play used to have their movie rental. I had no problem here in Thailand. I rented movies all the time. And then they move it into YouTube. And you can't rent new movies via the YouTube thing from Thailand anymore. I'm like, are you fucking morons?
Yeah, I can't do it here in Italy. Yeah, it's awful. It's really bad.
I said, okay, fuck you. I'll just go and pirate it.
Yeah. But that's what happened. And most people feel exactly the same way you do.
I don't mind paying the $2 to $3, but when you put all these obstacles in it, you can't watch it here. What do you mean here? It's on the fucking internet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, these entertainment folks, Hollywood and the music industry, I swear the dumbest fucks I've ever, it must be that their ability to create movies and music is so profound that they can completely fuck up the business side and still make millions of dollars.
Yeah, it cracks me up because there are the two things you're going to do. If you don't let me watch it, one, I'm just going to disengage and not watch it, which is really bad. See CNN and all that, news, that no one's watching anymore. Or I'm going to pirate it, which and it's funny. Out of the alternatives, if I'm a business owner, I'd rather you pirate it because at least you can say to somebody, "Ooh, you got to watch that," and it's getting some airplay at least. The stuff that and I get some certain stuff that in countries they don't want their people to watch. It's really, you probably noticed this as I have. Even though we're pretty close in age. The stuff that is getting made never been made 20, 30, 40 years ago. And there's something like I tried to watch Breaking Bad, and I know the acting is beyond compare and everyone loved it. But man, I know, but for me, and maybe I'm just a bit of a wimp. I don't know. But once they melted that guy in the bathtub, fell through the ceiling in season 1, I'm like, I'm out of here. Life's tough enough. I don't need to watch this. So I do have sympathy with some people who don't want their citizens to watch it. But again, I don't think it's up to them. It's another thing where we're relying on government to make choices for us. It's like, listen, people can watch 3 episodes and turn it off if they want to. That's simple.
It just popped into my head, but one of my favorite black comedies of all time is it was a movie called Very Bad Things. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I've never seen it. No.
It's fucking hilarious. It has what is it? Christian Slater in it. It has Cameron Diaz. It's like this bachelor party in Vegas. It goes really bad.
Right. Okay.
But when you said about the body and stuff I'm like, I remember. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to give any spoilers, or I don't want people to be gross out. But I don't know why we got on that subject, but the Trump thing and the Trump getting back on Trump. The Trump thing, which just from fucking day one. I think they took off an afternoon to be nice during the inauguration and the aftermath of the inauguration, and then the next day, and Russia. Everybody knows the story. The impeachments were laughable. Clown car circus
totally. Yeah, absolutely. And they just didn't know what to do. They had to just kind of attack. It was just constantly attack. Where I think a smarter strategy, and I always think this is a smarter strategy, give credit where it's due and save your capital to attack the really bad things. For me, and I've said this many times because I was an unabashed Trump supporter, absolutely unabashed. But if someone says to me, listen, he never drained the swamp, which he did not do. He called out the Fed and said rates are too low and this is a false economy. But then as president, made Jay Powell backtrack on his policy of raising rates, and I don't like that. Fine, and he did shut down the country during COVID. If you said that's why I'm voting for Biden, I could buy it. I really could. But I thought Joe Biden was an idiot back in 1990. The whole dementia thing doesn't it's awful and it's quite frankly frightening and sad. But how. When people say to me, how could you give up your U.S. passport? I'm like, even if you think the elections are fair, that's fine. But even if you think the elections are rigged, okay, 45% of Americans voted for Joe Biden. If the elections were rigged, I don't want to be there. It's not my country. I don't want to be in the place. It's ludicrous that people would vote for him. He was clearly losing his marbles beforehand. He chose Kamala Harris only because of her ethnicity. That's it. There's no other reason. She was third in California, her home state. If she was winning Cali and he's like, listen, I got to get her on board or she's going to take delegates away from me at the convention, that's a whole other story. She was third in California. She's a prosecutor. They're the worst people on the planet anyway. She incarcerated 1,500 black men on marijuana offenses, to up her record, basically. Awful human being. Just absolutely want her nowhere near the levers of power. Anyway, give me her. And I think that also gave him a bit of a boost.
Well, it's quite appropriate that I never even see anything about her in the news. Of course, that kind of is typical for VPs anyway, unless you're Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney. I think, they had to hide her.
Whether you agree or disagree with him, he's a competent dude.
Yeah. No. They have to hide her. She is so far above her level.
If Cheney had been the president, rather than Bush. What a disappointment.
Yeah, because I think it's funny that you say that. I agree, but for a different reason. I don't think he could have done half the stuff he did as president. Because the top guy has to. He's the one facing the press. He's the one who's facing the firing squad. The number two, the executive officer, kind of could go behind the scenes and just run everything and escape blame for everything. And it's very true. I mean, the repudiation of Liz Cheney is fantastic. Like her getting crushed in Wyoming in the Republican primary is just a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
And again, it's yet another. It's not on the level of Brexit and Trump, but it is the same parallel. It's like, listen, we do not want your brand of neocon anymore. And that's why you find the neocons becoming neo-Dems. Everyone's shifted again to the left because that's the big statist way to do things. And, her election result not remotely surprising. Most of the people who voted to impeach Trump, I think 7 out of 10 are out of office. Or going to be out of office by the midterms, and that's a good thing. I'm thrilled about that. But the problem with the Western style democracy is that it's a hydra. You never cut off enough heads at a time. And what are the big? Go ahead. Sorry.
Now, what's instructive about this whole thing is no matter how bad things got, and even the lockdowns and in the U.S. shutting down churches and devout Christian, even evangelical Christians who are as devout. The state doesn't tell us what to do if it comes in conflict with our religious values. I know I grew up in it partially. And so for them to just, so many of them, almost all, I think, there were some exceptions, that said, oh yeah, we'll close the church down. Outrageous. Given our history. And so I say that, you know what? Spouting ideology, arguing ideology, philosophy, religious philosophy, even secular philosophy, and Ayn Randian objectivism is a perfect example of a secular way to logically work out the rational details of a reasonably proper course for man, not being a sacrificial animal, but rather, an individual. So all of that, and people argue, and I used to myself, it gets you nowhere. You know how things change rapidly? Hungry bellies, and empty bank accounts.
And unemployment, exactly.
It's fucking rapid, man.
Yeah.
Look, this energy thing, that's a cost thing. I don't know how it's affecting you there in Italy, but
No, I got a T-shirt on. I'm okay.
Yeah, you're okay. You're. It's good that you're down a little bit in the south, So
Southern Europe at least, but it's kind of funny, I've said this too. I mean, I bash the 45% of Americans voters who voted for Biden, but quite frankly, I've got no use for the 2A guys either. They did nothing. Like I get messages like, "Oh, this just happened. Everyone's polishing their guns." I'm like, yeah, that's all they do. They don't do anything with them. They never fire them. They just polish the guns. They have been utterly useless. throughout this whole thing. And they've had their civil liberties utterly trampled on by spurious science and government overreach and mission creep, and they've done nothing. I find that disappointing, to say the least. But the energy stuff is really interesting because, when we talk about energy, it's usually like oil, gas, fire, something like that. But what a lot of people don't realize is that fertilizer is in there. And most of that stuff comes from Russia and Belarus. Luckily, American soil is beautiful and fertile, and America will never have a problem feeding itself. Okay, no matter how fat Americans get, they always have enough food. But Europe's got trouble. Europe's soil isn't nearly as good. And to me, this whole mess that's going on is just America, the U.S. government being perfectly happy to fight to the last European. Fight Russia to the last European. That's all it is. It's ridiculous.
Well, then, in this whole, like, the big new thing. So, COVID and then Ukraine. And fortunately, even though COVID was far more devastating on not just select countries, but globally, in terms of shutting things down and so on. But it took people so long to kind of get over COVID. There's all these different things you can sit and think about. It's how people, I think, it's how people think about threats to themselves. So, COVID is invisible, and think of COVID as like putting a curse on somebody like 600 years ago, where they really believed someone could do that, right? So then you got the obedience. So it really comes down to real base motivations like fight or flight, fear, and so on with COVID. So and then you have the see, you can see the Ukraine thing. You can see what's going on, right? They can lie and lie and lie. The virus, it's easy to lie because you can't see it, right?
Yeah.
It's just like God and God's will. You can't see it, but it's all around you. It's there. It's omnipresent.
Yeah.
So
Dark matter.
Omnipresent. So it's so if people can't actually see it or hear it, and the only thing they have is evidence of it, but that too can be easily manipulated, as it was. You can call any death a COVID death. So just to reinforce that, yes.
Well, there was loads of medical fraud around the world, especially the Philippines. The Philippines had insane amounts of medical fraud because they were getting the equivalent of $20,000 extra for every COVID death. So if you walked in there and you had lung cancer and then you keeled over, you had COVID death. It was ridiculous. And that's where the incentives are completely misaligned. And again, how do you pay for that 20 grand? You print money. So now everything's getting more expensive. And in the unraveling happening in the financial markets right now, and also commodity markets for a while, like lumber had spiked, oil and gas had spiked massively. And that's why it's always a good kind of method, even if you're not really into finance, just to keep one eye on what's going on, and
just to throw an aside in here, I'm going to put a link to Sean's publication, Rude Awakening. And you can be someone not too interested in markets or viciously interested in markets, but and banking and things like that. So you basically, it's as much as you want, you'll get it, right? Or if you want to stick around for the stories and the little, because there's the politics, the geopolitics and stuff like that. So really, it is focused on politics, geopolitics, and all of the whole financial systems going on in that. But really, you don't have to be a trader. You don't have to be doing anything like that to benefit with. So that's just the aside there. Yeah, but as I'm saying that, Sean, I'm thinking of something. Was it you? It may have been one of your roots. I read so much stuff, I forget where did I see this or where do I see this.
So I do the same thing. I know. Yeah, I do the same thing.
Well, particularly if you're one of the 1 or 2 percenters in terms of intellectually curious people, then you tend to. And I read people from the left too. I mean, I try to read everything Glenn Greenwald writes now.
Oh, I love him. Love him. I don't care his left wing. Yeah.
Well, what's really funny is this documentary I watched. I don't think I finished the thought on that. Anyway, it's on BBC. Yeah, I got into, but it's called The Boys from Brazil, and it's a very recent. I think it just came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's a 3-part and 3 full hours of the whole Bolsonaro thing. Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
And really, really interesting. What a guy that is. I mean, the shit he says. I mean,
well, the vehicular manslaughter he legalized.
You think Trump's mean tweets about? How about if Trump got up and said literally said the issue isn't about the damn natives or fucking trees. It's about the minerals. Literally, that's a literal quote, right?
That's brilliant.
He calls people bastards. He calls women whores.
Yeah, he gives zero. You know what? Yeah. And I don't follow Brazil as much as I probably should. It's a country that deserves a lot of respect nowadays. It will be the South American hegemon because Argentina can't get its shit together, which is a crying shame, by the way. Yeah, but again, and again, Argentina is a great example. Just slightly get off.
They're all too busy. Last I saw, they're all too busy getting, what do they call it? Do they call it plastic surgery anymore? Or what do they call it?
I have no idea.
It's a huge percentage of people who get augmentations.
Yeah. Argentina and South Korea, I think, are the 2 capitals of the world for that. But Argentina, they're the perfect example of bad monetary policy. If you don't run your economy right, you fall out of the top 10 economies in the world, because Argentina was, in 1900, one of the top 10 largest economies in the world, and is the only country out of the top 10 that fell out by 2000. And it's just bad policy. It's got everything. Okay, South America has literally everything you could possibly need. It could be completely self-sufficient, but
do you know offhand? Because I don't know. The question popped into my mind when you said that. How come all the Nazis went there?
I'm one of the blind spots for me is World War II. I'm not nearly as keen on it as everybody else is, but they probably went down there because they thought, listen, they were never going to get caught, and nobody was going to go down there. And some people, I think Adolf Eichmann was down there and got caught down there. But Brazil, I know you have no extradition. Like that to me would have been the better bet. But Argentina at the time, if I recall, I mean, it's that the old trope is an Argentinian is an Italian who speaks Spanish and drinks tea. Buenos Aires is a European city. So, why wouldn't you want to go down there? Plus, you got all that crazy land up north that's fertile, beautiful, all the gauchos, parading around up there. And, why not? But I don't think anywhere else in the world was safe for them at all. And I think to this day, most of your really good criminals are down in South America because of it.
So we have Trump, we have Bolsonaro, we have these things just popping, and the left.
Yeah.
What this does is they, rather than like back in the day where you had politicians who were more practical, right? Mm-hmm. They had their values and everything, but they were more practical. And so you have the left, opens itself up to every stupid fucking thing. And it blows my mind that they don't say, well, like, look, it's such a minuscule part of the population.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. Yeah, I think they're trying to capture the margins. I think, and I don't know why, because to me, if you capture the center, you pretty much eliminate your adversary. But it looks like the left is doing the complete opposite. They're like, we don't want the center. We want the margin because we think the margin is what's going to push us over. And I think that, to be fair, it worked for a little bit. It certainly worked during the election.
Well, yeah, because... Uh-oh.
Okay, I'm back. I apologize for that. Someone just tried to call me. I think they, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. This is just a mess. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Dangers of phone.
I'll make a mental note. Next time someone's going to be on the phone, I'll tell them, make sure you put it on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to go on my laptop, but I just I did the alpha beta for Ventura, and it doesn't seem to work. So never mind. Anyway, so go back. Yeah, the left seems just to want to capture, the 2 or 3% of the population that they think are going to drive them over. It's almost like the center's going to bob and weave whatever way it's going to. So we've got to make sure we get those, the alphabet people and everybody else voting for us, on that side.
Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, how, from what calculation do they think that everybody's going to embrace like this all, being a homosexual, whichever gender you are, I'm just going to use the blanket term. Mm-hmm. And it's people are vastly different. I've known some that they live completely normal lives. They're not weirdos, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. There's this failure to understand that just as much as you have heterosexual sexual deviance, just crazy ass deviance, so too do you have homosexual crazy ass deviance, right? Yeah. But in that Bolsonaro thing, that was one of the big things of his campaign, was this whole embrace of the LGBT alphabet, A B C D E F G stuff, and he did some crazy stuff, like they have their gay pride parades there, just like here, and everybody has them, and so on. And somebody captured some video of it right out in the open. One dude urinating on another dude, right? Bolsonaro put it out there. Say, this is what you want this is what you want your kids to see, and so on and so forth. Yeah. People are like, oh, how dare, how did, no, that's the thing. If you watch this documentary, it's like the whole thing is slanted against him.
Yeah.
When you watch it, it's like the preponderance and the totality of the evidence. You say, he was speaking to the hearts of people. That's why he was so popular, is because people have no power, and they hate this stuff from the bottom of their hearts, because most people actually are fairly conservative when you come right down to it. Otherwise,
and you get more conservative when you have children. Yeah,
that's why they're married. They have children. They're conservative. They just don't know it. And conservatives are shitty at putting that message out, because they think it's all about ideology. It's all about what God you believe in.
I would turn it around too. And I lived in London for many years. I've been out of Carnival. We got loads of pride parades there. And when people say, well, why would you ever be against that? It's like, well, listen, would I ever want, heterosexual couples, banging each other in the streets. No, I don't want my kids to see that. I absolutely have no interest in that. And it's not, again, and Micah, my son, his godfather, is married to a nice British man, and they live in London. We the problem with the Pride lobby, and also with a lot of the Black lobby, is that and especially the gender lobby, they're fighting wars that they won years ago. It is, the whole gender wage gap is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It is impossible to pay a woman less than a man doing equal work in the Western world. It is impossible. They cannot do it. Their HR departments would not let them do it. Okay. Now, again, if there's experience difference, if someone took 5 years off because they were having kids, then you've got and that's why Jordan Peterson kept talking about multivariate analysis. You can't just go the average man, the average woman, because it's just completely skewed. It's wrong. You're actually comparing the wrong things. So the gender thing with females, they won ages ago. The Black lobby, again, and sympathy to anybody who gets persecuted just based on their skin color, But does that happen in major corporations anymore? All right, maybe there are situations where one manager doesn't like another one who promotes somebody. Sure, but is it systemic? I'm not sure it is. I don't think it is. And I'll tell you, working in investment banking, the whole place was gay. The whole place was gay. So I like it never, because I was on Wall Street for so long and in the city of London and worked around the world, I didn't see it, funnily enough, in the most allegedly capitalist places on the planet. Just didn't see it.
Well, there's the inch mile to the whole thing. It doesn't matter which marginalized group that you emanate from, victimized, marginalized, no matter what is acknowledged and seeded, it's not enough. You want more. I lived we sold a house and made good money, and I thought, you know what, I'd really like to. I've always wanted to live in a loft, so we bought a loft, and it was not a big development, about 63 units as I recall, but it was probably about 20% homosexual folks, gay couples, lesbian couples, and singles on both sides, and I was friends with quite a lot of them. Back in the day, this is like, 2005 to 2010, roughly. Right? And I supported their quest for marriage under the theory that they have every bit as right to be just as miserable as the rest of us are. And so...
Yeah, it's funny about marriage, because marriage was a religious institution that got taken over by the state. And for me, like the Brits solved the problem and then completely screwed it up. So what they said was
that you have to stateize and federalize everything, just like business. I mean, the natural form of business is a sole proprietorship and a partnership. Right? Yeah, that's right. The natural form of business. But what do we have to do? We have to create corporations. Why do we have to create corporations? In order to shield the owners from liability. That's why
that's right. And that's another great point, because when you look at the Panama Papers, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, all these people hide money everywhere." It's like, yeah, they have to create corporations so they get sued, and then their accountants go, "Hey, now that you got this, here are all the cool things you could do with this." So of course they're going to do it. Who wouldn't do that? I mean, even Hermione Granger got caught up in that. Emma Watson, she was in the Panama Papers because she owned her house through a trust because she didn't want anyone to know where she lived, which I think is perfectly fine. That the whole thing that people usually get mad at, like in terms of criminality, it's like, well, don't create so many stupid laws. Then you don't have so many criminals, especially with stuff that, is none of your goddamn business anyway, like ownership. Like, unless you are doing something absolutely illegal and immoral and unethical, what I own or what you own is none of my goddamn business. But everybody's got their noses in things nowadays. And that's just an unfortunate part of our culture.
They want to codify everything, federalize everything. When everything that you can do, really, everything you can do, including civil unions, you can do with contracts, just simple, basic contracts.
Private law. That's it. It's private law. And again, Hans Hoppe, Private Law Society. I love the idea. And again, going back to my point before, like England had solved the problem, at least from a state point of view. Like, say to gay people, you've got a civil partnership, and to heterosexual couples, you've got a marriage. They're exactly the same thing. They give you everything you want. You have the right to inherit, and that was the big bone of contention too, because if you and I were a gay couple, Richard, God, well, what a dream. But if you and I were a gay couple and I snuffed it in most Western countries, you could not inherit my property tax free. And inheritance tax the death tax is awful. So, the state really encroached on the private property of gay people. And that's why the gay people said, well, okay, if you're going to do this, you've got to let us get married. Again, I think England had the issue solved where they said you have civil partnerships, which would be the exact same thing. But of course, once Obama flipped, then David Cameron had to flip because British prime ministers just stick their snouts up the U.S. president's butt as sport, which is a huge issue in England right now. It's just they've screwed it up so badly. Oh, God. Devastating.
So then, going back, so the gays get their marriage, right? And but then I noticed, okay, it's not enough. Then we need this and this and this and this and this and this. And it's the same thing with racism. I mean, the idea that there is institutional racism where and here's the funny thing. So anything you watch now, anything, TV shows, movies, commercials on TV, anything blacks and gays are way overrepresented as a percentage of the population.
Yeah.
White people are way underrepresented as a percentage of the population. This is global. It's not just the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
It's every Western country.
Yeah, it's every Western country, and even here. Even here we get that occasionally.
Hungary, and there was a country recently. Which country was it that prohibited? It was the other way around. That Nigeria. Nigeria said no more white people in TV commercials because we're a black country, and they are.
I didn't see that. They are. Oh yeah, I've been to Nigeria. Great people. I loved it. I wouldn't go there for a vacation, I have to admit, but I did really enjoy my time there. I had to teach one of the government agencies about finance. It was great. But it's and again, people.
I'd like to go there to meet one of these princes. Evidently, there's a lot of them.
Oh, everyone's a prince. No, yeah, kind of. Not like Prince William. No, definitely don't have the money. Which is funny because we're talking about death tax. They don't have to pay it, which is great.
Reminds me of that meme where they open that like storage space and there's just tons of cash and the guy's like I've been emailing people to get rid of this shit for decades.
Yeah. Pretty funny, man. Pretty funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So now I was going to say something, and as often we get sidetracked, but it's kind of part of what makes the conversation fun, I suppose. But I was going to say that somewhere, and it could have been in the room that I heard, that this whole Ukraine thing and the whole sanctions and everything is a lesson in, you can be a global financial power as big as you want, but he who has the gold still makes the rules, so to speak. And if the gold or the energy, so in other words, the gold not being just paper money, right? Yeah. So all the financial prowess in the world, if you've got the natural gas and the oil, and it comes as a push comes to shove. This is why there's no fucking way that Russia had anything to do with sabotaging that pipeline. Because
I'm so glad you said that, and I didn't.
Funds,
I mean,
they have shit
dude,
tons of leverage,
it's so funny,
right?
Oh.
So we talked about this yesterday because I think it was you I was talking with about that video Gonzalo Lira, like pretty much
which I put in the root, I put that in the root.
Which I have not read that. I should have before we got on this, but good, I did.
That's okay, mate. It's okay. Don't worry about
it. So he said right off the bat that it's got to be the Americans, and I was like, a little bit bright-eyed. I think I'm not sure.
Yeah, no one wants to believe that. Even I don't want to believe that. But
then I heard Tucker Carlson's piece. I'm sure you've seen that.
I didn't yet. No, I didn't. I went to bed very early last night.
It's on YouTube.
I will.
Yeah, and it's not long. It's like 10 minutes. But I was unaware of the Biden quote in February, and also the Undersecretary of State. I forget what the cunt's name is.
Yeah, I put them in the root too. Yeah, don't even bother reading the root. You already know it already. But yeah, I put him, I put her, I put Lira.
And the other thing I was unaware of, the same fucking day, that pipeline opens up from, is it Norway or Denmark?
Norway through Denmark to Poland. Yeah,
Denmark to Poland. Yeah, right.
That I didn't put in the root because I had forgotten about that.
You know how Tucker ends his piece. He says, well, he's talking about who has an interest in having the pipeline blow up, and he mentions that new pipeline, and he says it's probably going to be pretty good on their first opening day, pretty good for business, especially since they have such much less competition now. So
yeah, and I think it's the other Radek Sikorsky, who's married to Ann Applebaum, who is a fierce Putin critic, and he's the former.
Thank you, USA.
Yeah, he's thank you, USA. It's like, man, oh man, like I don't care if you're being sarcastic.
Tucker put that in there. Even mentioned that he's so close to Biden. His Twitter profile picture is a picture of him and Biden.
Yeah, I mean it's just not a good look. Now, and I also put in the root, like, listen, if the Russians wanted to do something that would make America look guilty as sin, this was it. So it could have been them. It could have been. If they just went, let's go kamikaze, the Germans never going to turn this on. We wasted $10 billion. Let's just blow the fucker up.
Well,
okay. But still, balance of probabilities.
Yeah. I don't know if you read Jeff Childers, Florida lawyer. Great newsletter. It's called Coffee and COVID, although it's about everything now. He's a Florida lawyer, amazing vocabulary, very, very sarcastic. It's hilarious. Some of his style is starting to rub off on me too. But he had pointed out that one of the issues here, the thing is like 80, 90 meters deep, so 300.
Oh yeah, yes.
So eventually they'll be able to put a submersible down there and take a close look at the damage and everything. So then you could say reasonably, well, okay, maybe Russia did do this as a way to just shut it off. Rather than shut it off, it's done and America gets blamed. That could be a strategy. Yeah. But if you go down there and you see the whole thing is busted to smithereens, where a repair job is like really, really untenable, as opposed to more like surgical damage, so that you replace one section of pipe, boom, you're back in business.
Yeah.
And then the actual damage needs to be looked at and investigated, but that ain't gonna happen real soon.
Yeah. No, and they've alleged and again, we don't know. This is pure speculation that the damage is awful. It's not a little bit of damage. It's not surgical. It's probably inoperable. That was one of the things I've read.
Yeah,
so
certainly it's inoperable. But I'm talking about
no. But I mean, like unfixable, like inoperable, like for good. So which would be a damn shame.
Everything is fixable. Everything's fixable.
Well,
they built it.
Yeah, but at what cost? I mean, and that's the thing. It's going to cost billions to fix. Apparently, and it only costs $10 billion to build. And again, going back to first principles, my problem with this whole thing, like if you're America and you cause the fall of the Soviet Union, you believe you caused the fall of the Soviet Union. You've got no enemies now. To me, if they integrated Russia into the West, this world would have been such a better place because, if you've got a country that does a couple things very well, and Russia really only did a couple things very well. One of the things is oil and gas, and you have them shipping that oil and gas to Germany, and you have them dependent on Russian gas. As long as they play nice, that's okay. Like the argument, like, oh my God, you're dependent on Russia, they can just turn the taps off. Yeah, if America just left Germany alone, that never would have happened. And that's why I think the Unz report put there. I think Ron Unz wrote about this. He's like, this whole thing really isn't about Ukraine at all. This is always and has always been about Germany. Because if you marry German engineering with cheap Russian energy and you sell that to the Chinese middle class, America's obsolete. You just don't need it anymore. And it's not that, again, it's useless. America will always be a regional power, and it's not like the place is going to fall apart, can't feed itself, can always feed itself. It's just you don't have to export a lot of stuff because there's nothing that America exports right now that the world needs. The music, the culture, that's something that they want. Harley Davidson's something that they want and aspire to. There is literally nothing that comes out of America that anybody absolutely needs. Whereas potash, oil, gas, vanadium, cobalt, that's stuff the world needs, and that's what Russia is sitting on in abundance. And that is what frightens Washington to death. Because, I wrote about Halford Mackinder's Heartland theory. If you control the heartland, you control the world island. If you control Ukraine, essentially, then you'll control the whole world island through the heartland. And it's something that just absolutely scares America. The thing that allowed America to rest and grow and breathe in its infancy was its isolation. You have 5,000 kilometers of ocean on either side. You've got the Canadians on top of the Mexicans below you. Nothing threatens America. America is uninvadable. So you were able to grow this incredible economy, the greatest the world's ever seen by miles. But now, because you're so far away, and the rest of the world has caught up, and caught up primarily because of American largesse, and because Henry Kissinger was a moron and gave China all our tech back in the 70s, because he thought, China's gonna be friends with us, and they're gonna hate the Russians. No, and hasn't happened, and many policy mistakes since then have caused this.
That foreign policy got going in 1972. I was old. I was 11 years old, and I remember it was when I was first starting to take note of political things, and that was, I think, 72 was the year Nixon went to China.
Yeah. Well, and again, if you read Pillsbury's book, The 100-Year Marathon, which is only about that thick, it's a really good book, but it's basically a mea culpa. It's like all the mistakes and he used to work for Kissinger. He was one of the mandarins in the State Department. He's like, we made a huge mistake. He's like, and they hate us. They Chinese hate us. They don't love us. They don't want to be our friends.
There's one other before we part. We're at an hour and 10 minutes now. So there's one other thing. I put up a video today, and it took 3 things. So it took this gas sabotage thing, and then some guy getting arrested by well, first one cop, but he was on in his driveway, and his wife asked him. He had some words with the cop, and then his wife asked him what was going on, and he said, dickhead, referring to the cop. So, guy goes on his property, tries to arrest him. Eventually, 7 other cops show up to arrest the guy who called the cop a dickhead. Literally, this is in the place where Great Britain used to be. So,
yeah, Little Britain now. Yeah. Oh God.
So
not surprising.
That's one thing. There's a sabotage thing, and then I forget her name. It's this woman in Russia.
Oh, the Russian thing. Yeah, I watched part of that. Sorry, I was watching that before we got on. Yeah. I was zooming through it. What? Yeah, I'm curious to hear what your conclusion. Yeah.
Isn't it like ironic though brilliant? And Putin has done this too. He's lectured the West about our moral decay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and if you look at Russia and China, and you live in Asia, and Thailand's got a great culture, and
it's really, people think, you have girl bars, right, and stuff. Welcome to Asia. All of Asia has
Asia
exactly. Has tens of thousands of girl bars with women hostesses, and whatever happens is up to you and the hostess. Tens of thousands. Yet nobody ever caters to them. They have no customers. I wonder how they survive, because if you ask any guy, I never go, never watch porn, and yet the porn on the internet makes billions every year.
I know. Nobody does that. Magic money. but it's a great point. Like if you're looking at America right now, do you want to be like America? Is that what you want to be like? I said that to one of my buddies who's also my wife. For your viewers, my wife's Filipino. Our son's biracial. I've got a lot of friends because I lived in Asia. A lot of white guys married a lot of Asian girls. All the kids are mixed. And they're all beautiful. But it's funny. I was terrified of letting him grow up in America. I didn't want him to grow up in America. I am so glad we live in Italy. I can't tell you. And one of the reasons is if you look at like the kids who are mixed, that are the biracial kids in America, it's never like, oh, I'm so proud to be white. Like, I'm so glad daddy is white. It's I am not white, whatever I am, and that's what I am. And it's like, aren't you kind of both? Like, aren't you half? Like, our son Micah, we're quite lucky because he's clearly Asian. Like, if you look at his eyes, he's clearly Asian, but he's I don't know, in Italy, because there's such a racial mix here, just in Italy itself, he fits in fine, from a physical perspective. So I don't think I have to worry about any of that stuff, and I hope I don't, because I just feel terrible for these kids who are, taking half their ancestry and just going, no, I don't want that because they're evil colonists, and going, oh, I want this one because, oh, wait, that's the, even though they make great food, those are the ones that were running to the West trying to get out of their own countries. Like I find it awful.
It's quite interesting to me that, especially, you go in, you take America, but you can also take, to some extent, other Western democracies, in Europe and everything, and for decades, the condemnation of countries like the USSR and China, Red China, and then later, quasi-capitalist China doing a pretty good job of it, and Russia, and then amongst other countries as well. So and in America, they're Christian. And there's this idea that Christianity is the true religion,
Richard, I would argue if I just you go ahead, finish it out. I'll tell you what I think.
Okay, yeah. So the condemnation of the rest of the world was moral one. Godless, blah blah blah. Go down the list, or they have false gods like Buddha and so on and so forth. And in the end, it turns out that for the most part, America in particular, and other places that are heavily, Italy and France and Spain are heavily Catholic. I mean, at least in lip service, it's like over 90% Catholic, right? And when I was in France in the early 90s, it was like the figure was like 97% professed to be Catholic.
Yeah, it's lower now, but it's still majority Catholic.
Yeah. And so in the end, all of these atheist or false god worshiping societies turn out to be the ones whose familial and community and social conservatism actually is based on something real that they don't wish to give up, right? And one could say that in showing through in these movements, like in Italy, in France, though Macron still won, go figure. In Sweden, so there are now these people who are not so afraid to say we have conservative family and social and community values, right?
Yeah,
and we want just like your new leader said, we wish to keep our identities, right?
Yes.
We want our racial identity, we want our gender identity, we want our religious identity, we want our community identity to remain intact. That's who we are, right? And
I love that.
Here we have a supposedly godless country such as China, which is fairly conservative in terms of these values, and Russia. Putin has spoken of it many times. If you look at some of his speeches, and they're lecturing us on morality. Isn't that ironic?
Well, no, I think I think you've made a great point. My point about this, and I've written this actually in the Root. Luckily, I haven't gotten a huge backlash, but the main problem, and I'm going back to first principles here. I think the main problem with Russia is that it is now the white, heterosexual, and Christian country, and America is this communist admixture that you're supposed to just blend into this nothingness, because that's what the USSR was. It was Russia, and you had the Baltics, and then you had the stands, and then everybody was supposed to be the same. We're supposed to make everybody exactly the same, and it didn't matter what you look like. That's why, like, even Alexander Dugin, they call him, as like this fascist philosopher. He's a microwave communist. He's just a microwave communist. What Putin has done, and this is something I absolutely admire. It's like, listen, we are Russia. We are indeed white and Orthodox and conservative Christians. And if you want to be a part of our country, Chechnya, anybody else who comes in, but his Chechen fighters are like his most loyal fighters now. Notice that they're Muslim. Okay, they're his best fighters. You have to come and emulate us. We do not have to move to you. And growing up in the States when you did and I did, it was, if you don't like it, get the out of the country. Nobody says that anymore. Yeah. Nobody says that anymore. So we've switched spots, and and that is awful. I think
I was in China, in Qingdao, in 1986 when it was still. This is way before everything happened. I mean, literally, they didn't even have street lights. There was a guy. They have one of those full employment schemes. The person on one of these concrete pedestals in the middle of the intersection directing traffic right now. And the other thing is, everybody wore the Mao uniform. Citizens, military, politics, everybody wore the Mao uniform. And even though they had positions, like within their militaries and their political offices, their administrative offices, nobody wore an insignia. So it was an attempt to make everybody equal and be the same and look the same. And so your point is well taken about now that's America's like leading the charge on that, and Western Europe, and to some extent Australia, Canada,
yes, absolutely,
of course, and these and you go down to Latin America, South America, Latin America, they want none of it. They want their families, right? They want their family. Latin America is very much like, and my ex-wife was Mexican descent, so I know about the family values, and it's very similar. France, I lived there 2 years, not so much, but I'll tell you, Italy, Spain, so big, huge on the family. Both of those, Spain and Italy, remind me of Mexican and South American culture in that regard. And a lot of this shit they just won't put up with. That's why the Democrat left is losing losing the Hispanic voters in America. They're far more.
I got in trouble. I got in trouble with my colleagues. We were teaching at a bank, and I was joking around. I said, the best part about the left is that they don't reproduce. So I'm kind of hoping this mess goes away in another 10, 20 years. Because it's ridiculous. It is starting to reach the end of the road now, but like I said, luckily they don't tend to have kids, so they're not passing their ideology on to anybody else. And I hope this mess ends quickly.
Sure. I'm sure you've seen the documentary Idiocracy.
No, I haven't yet. I try to stay away from that stuff that makes me cringe. I don't have tolerance for that.
It's a cult classic now because it's a comedy, and it wasn't even released right away because it's so true. And the thing, I forget how old it is. It's probably like 15-ish years old now, or more. But at the time it was not. So actually, it came out. I think it was never released in theaters. It was only on like DVD, and of course you've been able to rent it forever. Idiocracy. You probably heard of it, but
absolutely, yeah.
But you have to see it because it's like what people eventually started saying is, "Oh, it's a documentary," and the reason I say that is because the way it starts out is exactly what you're saying. It juxtaposes these people in their like Manhattan apartments saying, well, we're probably going to have kids and so on. We're going to be really careful. We're research and then it shows trailer trash, right? And there's kids running all over. You're getting drunk and everything. Then it cuts back and forth. Anyway, what ends up is, with the state of the world, there's no way we're gonna bring a child into this world. They're professionals. They're probably lawyers, doctors, bankers, financiers, all of that stuff. And then it cuts back to the trailer trash, and there's kids yelling and screaming, running all over, in the trailer park. And so that goes right to the point that you're making, and that is, but you know what? That's a thing that happens in generations. I won't be alive to see that, but and then there's other, but the Muslims produce quite a lot. But the thing is that's so varied. Here in the south of Thailand, where I live now, I mean, you'd never see a mosque or a Muslim up in the north, Isan or any place, But I live like a few hundred yards or a few hundred meters, I should say, from a mosque. You know what? I really get a kick out of the prayers on the speaker. It's like Gregorian chants and stuff like that. It's really relaxing, especially they start at like 4:30 in the morning. But when I lived out in the countryside, the monks, there was a temple just within earshot. I think it's 4:30 in the morning. They start with their morning chants and prayers. I loved it. I would get up, have my coffee, smoke, sit there, and listen to that, and so yeah, it's
yeah. No, I travel to the Middle East a lot for work. I love the place. I think it's because of all the Indiana Jones movies I watched. I just love the desert. But here in Italy, I get the church bells again, so that's beautiful too. Ding dong! It's like, oh yes, okay, I'm where I should be. It's fantastic. Yeah. So no, that stuff, it's really nice. And
all right. We're
trying
at
to take it away from us.
so we can do this anytime we want, Sean. That's the cool thing about this. And this was done so spur of the moment. What I emailed you yesterday, I thought, you know what? I want to try this new stream. It's called StreamYard, and you don't need apps and software and stuff like that. We're doing it both. I'm doing it from my Chrome browser on my Mac. Are you doing it from an iPhone? I assume, right?
Yep.
Yep. And so and you're doing it in the Safari browser on iPhone. So
that's right. Yeah.
And it works. It works good. It's easy. You can either record, or I'm actually live streaming to YouTube right now, right as we're speaking. So I think it's recording it too as well. So well, anyway, good talking with you, Sean. I don't know that.
Likewise.
I don't know that the world will be a better place, but at least we were rude.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for having me again, my friend. That was great.
And let's hope there's a few people who have been awakened. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Stick around. I'm going to cut the live broadcast here.
Cool.